I was really hoping I would never have to make a video like this. I'm excited to share our journey, but this isn't something I ever expected or was planning on sharing. But I want to be an open book for other women and couples out there going through the same thing. So here is how we went from our first IUI cycle to an early miscarriage, also known as a chemical pregnancy. And disclaimer, I do have notes on my phone because I'm nervous. So I'll start from 1 week post IUI. If you want to watch our IUI video, I'll put it up here somewhere. But so 1 week post IUI, I went in for blood work to check my progesterone levels. And they do that because it's an indication of how well you ovulated the week prior. So we did that, and mine came back at 21.37, which they were really happy with. They said those are great numbers, and that was promising to us, to Michael and I, because we were like, okay, well, at least that part of the process is what it needs to be. You know what I mean? So that was comforting to us. We felt like those numbers were where they needed to be, so we were happy with that. And I actually did end up testing out my trigger shot. For those of you who aren't aware, when you get a trigger shot for ovulation, for treatment, it does contain HCG in it, the hormone HCG, so it does make you test positive on at-home pregnancy tests. And so what a lot of women do, and what I did, was I tested it out of my body. And so I had the cheap pregnancy strips, test strips, at home, so I was taking those every day, and I progressively watched the line fade, and once that line was gone and the test line was stark white, I knew that the trigger shot was out of my system. So then I started testing for pregnancy at about 9 days post-ovulation, and all my tests were coming back negative. I was doing the pregnancy test strips. I was also doing the first response, and like I said, they were all coming back negative. The next check was at 2 weeks post-IUI, and that was to check my HCG levels. So it's essentially a pregnancy test, but done through blood work. And so I went in to do that, and to be honest, I was starting to lose hope at this point because, you know, you see so many people, I'm on a lot of forums and groups and stuff, and you see people testing positive at like 9 days post-ovulation or something, and I was starting to just kind of prepare myself to not be pregnant and just kind of be let down. But there's always that little part of you that's like, maybe I'm just not one of those people that will test early, you know? So there's always, you're always holding on to that little bit of hope, but I was starting to prepare myself, to say the least. And so we got that blood work done 2 weeks post-IUI, and we were actually out to lunch with Michael's family. They were visiting from out of town, and when we got the phone call, and they said the test came back positive, and we were extremely surprised and very excited, obviously, but I wasn't getting any symptoms. I did not feel pregnant. The only thing I really had was mild cramping, and I had convinced myself that these were premenstrual cramps, which clearly they weren't. Another thing that they had indicated was that my HCG levels were definitely on the lower end. They came back 13.59, which is very low. So they wanted me to come back 2 days later on Friday to do another blood draw to make sure that that number increases by at least 60%. I actually ended up testing positive the following day of the blood work at home, and I was actually really thrilled to see those lines because after so many years of trying to conceive, you start dreading taking pregnancy tests, and not seeing the lines that indicate pregnancy is like, it's heart-wrenching. And so to finally have seen those, I cried. I cried because I was like, oh my God, it's finally happening. It felt real. I ended up going back in on Friday to get another blood draw, and by the time I got home, I got a phone call from the doctor because I did ask them to expedite it because it was just eating at me. I really needed to know. And I did end up getting the phone call that unfortunately, instead of increasing by 60%, that number had ended up decreasing to 8. It was devastating because I knew what that meant. It's just a classic case of a chemical pregnancy. That's a very tell sign. So it was hard. It was a hard pill to swallow, and it just felt like we were so close because clearly the IUI did work. The medication did work. My body did what it was supposed to do. But now we were left with, for whatever reason, this is now happening. And that was tough. And Michael came home not long after I got the phone call, and we got to just spend the day together, sit in our feelings, process, and accept what we had just been told. Despite it being early, it still did feel like a loss to me. And it was a loss to us because to us, that was a pregnancy. We were pretty upset, but then the following day, I actually ended up starting my cycle. And TMI, but I had some really heavy bleeding that Saturday and Sunday. But then I ended up emailing my IUI coordinator and saying, hey, do we still need to get another round of blood work done because I just started my cycle? And also, we would like to just jump right into IUI cycle number 2. And that's something Michael and I had discussed, that there was a possibility that IUI cycle 1 could be a failure. And that's something that we had somewhat prepared ourselves for. And if that was going to be the case, we would follow through with IUI cycle number 2 as soon as we could. So my IUI coordinator did inform us like, hey, okay, since you started your cycle, there's no need for more blood work. Let's just bring you back in on Monday for a baseline ultrasound, and we'll start from there, IUI cycle number 2. So that's pretty much the update. So we are jumping in to our second IUI cycle, and we are still very excited and hopeful. But I do want to say, if you are experiencing a chemical pregnancy and you are having a hard time dealing, you are not alone. I highly, highly recommend reaching out to friends or family for support if you need to and if you want to, because I guarantee you, you know someone who's been through it. It's unfortunate, but chemical pregnancies are pretty common. And I was surprised when I reached out to one of my friends because she had gone through IUI, and she told me I had the exact same thing. So she had experienced the same thing, and it was nice to just talk it out with someone that can relate to you and you can relate to them, and just kind of feel your feelings and that feeling of not being alone. So don't feel like you're alone. It will pass. There's definitely still hope, and it's not the end. But feel free to share down below your experiences. This is definitely a safe space, and I sincerely hope that your heart is full. And I thank you for watching today and coming along this journey with me. And I will see you on IUI cycle number 2. Bye.